"We're not paying for your surgery, you should have saved money like we told you," my mother said when I called her from the hospital, the diagnosis still fresh, the terror still raw in my voice. "Your father and I warned you for years to build an emergency fund instead of wasting money on that apartment and those trips. This is a consequence of your choices." I sat in the hospital bed with my phone pressed against my ear listening to my own mother explain why my medical emergency didn't merit her help while the surgeon's words about tumor removal and urgency echoed in my head. But why did I stop begging after that call, and why 2 years later did my mother's desperate voice on the phone asking for $50,000 to save my brother's failing business receive the exact same words she'd given me? "You should have saved money like you told me." The silence on the line lasted nearly 10 seconds. "Vivian, that's completely different. Is it? I needed money for surgery. You needed money for Marcus's business. You had the resources and refused. I have the resources now, and I'm refusing. But Marcus will lose everything. I almost lost my life, Mom. You told me it was a consequence of my choices. Now Marcus is facing consequences of his choices. Why should I treat him differently than you treated me?" She screamed that I was heartless. She called me ungrateful, selfish, cruel. I hung up and blocked the number. The diagnosis had come at the worst possible time. I was 31, 2 years into building my career as an independent graphic designer. I'd left my corporate job to pursue freelance work, trading stability for freedom, a reliable paycheck for the chance to build something of my own. My parents had disapproved of every choice. "You're throwing away a good job with benefits," my mother had said when I announced my plans. "What happens when you get sick? Who pays then?" my father had added. They'd been right, in the cruelest possible way. 6 months into freelancing, before I'd built enough savings to weather emergencies, a routine checkup had revealed a tumor that needed immediate surgical intervention. The surgery would cost $47,000 after what my catastrophic insurance covered. The call to my parents had been desperation, not expectation. My relationship with them had always been complicated. Marcus, younger by 3 years, male, and conforming to their expectations, had always been the favored child. They'd paid for his college while I'd taken loans. They'd funded his wedding while I'd received a card. They'd co-signed his mortgage while I'd been told to figure things out myself. I'd accepted this dynamic as a child, questioned it as a teenager, and distanced myself from it as an adult. But a medical emergency had stripped away my pride and forced me to ask for help from people who'd never been inclined to provide it. "We're not paying for your surgery. You should have saved money like we told you." The words had been delivered without hesitation, without apparent guilt, without any acknowledgement that they were refusing to help their daughter face a potentially life-threatening condition. My father had added his perspective. "We gave you good advice for years. You chose not to follow it. We can't keep bailing out children who don't listen." They'd never bailed me out. Ever. The comparison to Marcus's constant support was so absurd I'd laughed, a hollow, desperate sound that probably concerned the nurse checking my vitals. I survived without them. The hospital's financial assistance program covered part of the cost. A GoFundMe campaign, organized by friends I'd made since leaving home, raised another portion. I negotiated payment plans for the remainder, stretching payments over 3 years at interest rates that felt like additional punishment. The surgery was successful. The tumor was benign. I recovered over 6 weeks in a studio apartment, alone, eating soup I'd prepared in advance because I couldn't afford takeout and couldn't stand long enough to cook. Friends visited when they could. Colleagues sent work my way when I was ready to return. The freelance community I joined rallied around me in ways my family never had. I survived. I recovered. I rebuilt. And I never forgot. The 2 years after surgery transformed my life. Recovery gave me perspective that comfort never had. I'd faced mortality at 31, faced abandonment when I needed help most, and emerged with a clarity about what mattered and who mattered that I'd lacked before. I threw myself into work with intensity born from near loss. The freelance career my parents had dismissed became a business, a design studio with clients across multiple industries, revenue that exceeded my old corporate salary, stability I'd built entirely myself. I saved aggressively. The emergency fund my parents had lectured me about grew until it could cover a year of expenses. Then 2 years. Then enough that money became a tool rather than a terror. The financial security they'd criticized me for lacking was now greater than theirs had ever been. I learned about Marcus's situation through my aunt, my mother's sister, who'd always treated me with more warmth than my immediate family. "Your brother's restaurant is failing," Aunt Patricia told me during one of our periodic calls. "He took out loans against the house, borrowed from friends, put everything into making it work. Now he's facing bankruptcy." "I'm sorry to hear that. Your parents are trying to help, but they don't have enough. They refinanced their house twice already. There's nothing left to borrow against." "That's unfortunate. Vivian." Aunt Patricia paused. "They're going to ask you for money. I wanted to warn you. Thank you for the warning. What are you going to do? I'm going to remember what they did when I needed help. The call came 3 weeks later. My mother's voice was different, softer, more desperate, lacking the confidence she'd had when dismissing my surgery as a consequence of poor choices. Vivian, I need to talk to you about Marcus. He's in trouble. I heard. The restaurant, he tried so hard, but the economy, the competition, what do you need, Mom? He needs $50,000. To clear the most urgent debts and keep the creditors from taking the house. Your father and I don't have it. We've already given everything we could. And you're calling me because? Because you're family. Because Marcus is your brother. Because we need help. The irony was so thick I could taste it. I let the silence stretch before responding. 2 years ago, I called you from a hospital bed. I'd just been diagnosed with a tumor that needed immediate surgery. I was terrified and alone and facing $47,000 in medical bills I couldn't pay. Vivian, you told me I should have saved money like you'd advised. You told me my medical emergency was a consequence of my choices. You refused to help your daughter when she was facing surgery. That was different. How? How was it different? I needed money for something I couldn't control. Marcus needs money for a business he chose to open, chose to fund with borrowed money, chose to keep operating when it was clearly failing. He's your brother, and I'm your daughter. That didn't seem to matter when I needed surgery. My mother's response was predictable: deflection, justification, emotional manipulation. We couldn't afford to help you then. We were already stretched thin. You took a 2-week European vacation 3 months after my surgery. I saw the pictures on Facebook. That was already paid for. You helped Marcus with his wedding that same year. $15,000 for a party, but nothing for my surgery. Marcus's wedding was a family event, my surgery was a medical emergency. You prioritized a party over keeping your daughter alive. You're being dramatic. The surgery wasn't life-threatening. The surgeon told me there was a 15% chance of complications that could be fatal. I had to sign documents acknowledging that I might die on the table. My voice cracked slightly, but I steadied it. You didn't ask about the risks. You didn't ask if I was scared. You just told me I should have saved money and hung up. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes. My mother cycled through every manipulation she'd ever employed: guilt, anger, tears, accusations of ingratitude. She invoked family loyalty, sibling responsibility, Christian forgiveness. She reminded me of childhood sacrifices she'd made, of times she'd supported me that I'd apparently forgotten, of the importance of maintaining relationships. You'll regret this, she said finally. When Marcus loses everything, when he can't recover, you'll have to live with knowing you could have helped. I live with knowing you could have helped me and chose not to. I've made peace with that. You can make peace with this. You're not the daughter I raised. You're right. The daughter you raised would have given you the money and gone back into debt to do it. She would have prioritized your approval over her own stability. She would have let you treat her differently than Marcus for her entire life without pushing back. I took a breath. That daughter almost died, alone, because her parents valued lectures over help. This daughter learned from that experience. I hung up and blocked the number. Then I blocked my father's number, Marcus's number, and the numbers of 3 cousins I suspected would be recruited to pressure me. The family communication channels went silent. The aftermath played out over months. Through Aunt Patricia, I learned that Marcus's restaurant closed. He declared bankruptcy. The house, the one my parents had co-signed for, had refinanced their own home to support, was sold in a short sale that left everyone with damaged credit and empty pockets. My parents moved from their longtime home into a rental apartment. Their retirement savings, depleted by Marcus's rescue attempts, would barely cover their remaining years. Marcus and his wife moved in with her parents. His marriage strained under the financial pressure. Last I heard, they were in counseling. The family I distanced myself from collapsed under the weight of choices I had no part in. I felt many things watching this unfold from a distance. Grief, sometimes, for the family I wished I'd had, for the relationships that might have been different. Vindication, occasionally, for the proof that my parents' favoritism had consequences they hadn't anticipated. Guilt, rarely, for having resources I could have shared but chose not to. What I didn't feel was regret. My parents had made clear 2 years earlier that family support was conditional. That help was reserved for children who followed instructions, who made approved choices, who fit expectations. I hadn't fit. So I hadn't received help. Now Marcus didn't fit either. His business had failed, his choices had been wrong. But somehow, magically, he still deserved support. Still deserved sacrifice. Still deserved the family resources that had never been available to me. The double standard was so glaring that refusing to participate in it wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. Aunt Patricia served as occasional messenger for the next year. Your mother is heartbroken. I understand. She says she made mistakes, that she's sorry. Has she actually apologized? Specifically, directly, for refusing to help with my surgery? She says you're holding on to the past. That's not an apology. That's deflection. Can't you just move forward? Be the bigger person? I spent my whole childhood being the bigger person. I accepted less so Marcus could have more. I tolerated favoritism because fighting it wasn't worth the conflict. I asked for help once, when I genuinely needed it, and I was told my medical emergency was a consequence of poor choices. I paused. Being the bigger person almost killed me. I'm done. The first direct contact came 18 months after I'd blocked them. A letter, sent to my business address. I'd moved twice since the surgery, and they clearly didn't have my home address anymore. Dear Vivian, I've had time to think about what happened between us. Your father's health has declined since we lost the house, and facing our own mortality has given me perspective I lacked before. I was wrong to refuse to help with your surgery. I was wrong to treat you differently than Marcus. I was wrong to prioritize lectures over support when you needed your mother. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I understand now what I did, and I'm sorry. Not because I need something from you, I don't expect anything. Just because you deserve to hear it. Your father is sorry too, though he'll probably never say it directly. We failed you when it mattered most. That's something we have to live with. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. If you don't, I understand. Mom. I read the letter 3 times. Then I set it aside for a week. Then another week. Then a month. The apology seemed genuine, more genuine than anything my mother had said during our last conversation. It didn't make demands, didn't manipulate, didn't try to extract forgiveness or renewed relationship. It just acknowledged what had happened and expressed regret. I responded with a letter of my own. Mom, I received your letter. Thank you for the apology. I believe you mean it, and I recognize how hard it must have been to write. I'm not ready to reconnect. Maybe I never will be. What happened during my surgery changed something fundamental in how I see our relationship. I learned that your support was conditional in ways I hadn't understood, and that conditioning doesn't disappear because circumstances have changed. I don't hate you. I don't wish you harm. I hope Dad's health improves and that you find stability in whatever comes next. But I've built a life without family support, and I've discovered that life works better for me. The people who helped during my recovery, friends, colleagues, the strangers who contributed to my GoFundMe, they showed me what unconditional support looks like. That's the standard now. I can't go back to accepting less. I'm glad you understand what happened. Understanding is important, even when it doesn't change outcomes. Vivian. The letters continued occasionally, once every few months. My mother wrote about her life, about Dad's health, about small victories and ongoing struggles. She never asked for money again. She never demanded reconnection. She just wrote, maintaining a thread of communication that didn't require me to do anything I wasn't ready for. I responded sometimes. Brief letters, emotionally careful, keeping her informed of major developments without opening doors I wasn't ready to walk through. It wasn't reconciliation. It was something else, a provisional peace, perhaps. An acknowledgement that relationship could take forms other than the binary of fully connected or completely estranged. Marcus never reached out directly. Aunt Patricia mentioned that he was angry, that he blamed me for not helping when the family needed it, that he considered my refusal a betrayal. He says you could have saved everything if you just helped. He says I should have prioritized his business over the boundaries I set in response to how I was treated. He doesn't see it that way. He doesn't have to. His perception doesn't change my experience or my choices. Do you ever wonder if you made the right decision? I wonder about a lot of things. But I do wonder if protecting myself from people who abandoned me during a medical emergency was correct. That I'm certain about. The business I built continued to grow. The design studio expanded to include 3 employees, then 7. We moved into proper office space. Revenue grew to the point where $50,000 would have been uncomfortable but manageable to give away. I could have afforded to help Marcus by the time my mother called. That was part of what made refusing meaningful. It wasn't about inability. It was about choice. My parents had chosen not to help me when I was facing surgery. They'd had the resources, the European vacation, the wedding contribution, the lifestyle they maintained while I struggled. They'd chosen their priorities, and I hadn't been among them. I chose my priorities too. Financial security. Emotional stability. Boundaries that protected me from people who demonstrated they would abandon me when I needed them most. I donate now, to medical debt charities, to organizations that help uninsured patients access care. The terror I'd felt facing surgery without resources stayed with me even after the financial anxiety faded. I remembered what it felt like to be alone, afraid, unable to afford necessary medical treatment. I remembered the GoFundMe strangers who'd contributed $5, $20, $50 because they understood that no one should face medical emergencies alone. I couldn't help my family. The wound there was too deep, the dynamic too damaged. But I could help strangers facing what I'd faced, and that felt like turning my worst experience into something meaningful. My mother died 3 years after that first letter. Aunt Patricia called with the news. Stroke, sudden, no suffering. Dad was devastated but managing with Marcus's help. I attended the funeral. It was awkward. Marcus refused to speak to me, relatives whispered behind hands, my father looked at me like I was a stranger who resembled someone he once knew. But I sat in the church, I listened to the service, I paid respects to a woman who'd given me life and then withheld support when that life was threatened. At the graveside, my father approached. She was glad you came. I'm sorry for your loss. She talked about you. Read your letters to me. He paused. She knew she'd failed you. It ate at her, those last years. I know. She told me. Can we? He stopped, uncertain how to finish the sentence. I don't know, Dad. Maybe someday. Not today. He nodded, accepting an answer that wasn't yes but also wasn't no. The relationship with my father remains provisional. We exchange occasional calls now, brief, careful, avoiding deep waters. He's learned not to mention Marcus's ongoing resentment. I've learned to ask about his health without probing his regrets. It's not reconciliation. It's not estrangement. It's something in between, a relationship reduced to its most basic elements, stripped of expectations that repeatedly led to disappointment. Maybe that's all some families can manage. Maybe that's enough. She told me I should have saved money when I needed surgery. She chose a European vacation over helping her daughter face a tumor. 2 years later, when she called asking for $50,000 to save my brother's failing business, I gave her the same words she'd given me. You should have saved money like you told me. She called me heartless. I called it consequences. The family that abandoned me during a medical emergency expected me to rescue them from financial choices. I'd learned from their example, when someone doesn't fit your priorities, you let them face consequences alone. They taught me that. I just applied the lesson they'd given.